2022 in the Always Sunny in Sayreville League, and I have never looked better. This is the Preseason Primer. I'm your host and commissioner, DC in the City. Welcome to the 11th season of the Always Sunny in Sayreville Fantasy Football League. We're going to run through a couple of different things, obviously run through the keepers, the draft order, stuff like that. But first, a couple of notes of business that we need to get to. The first thing, if you haven't sent your dues in yet, I'm at DC in the City or $DC in the City or my phone number, or you can just text me. But if I haven't gotten your dues yet, let's make that happen. Big news in special teams. Kickers have been eliminated from the starting lineup. I noted this in a written message to the league, but I wanted to reiterate that there will be another flex position. The starting lineup is still the same amount of players. The roster is still the same amount of players. You're just starting an extra position guy. It should be a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting, and add a little bit more strategy as you're building your rosters. Waivers, speaking of roster building, waivers are now a fab budget system. What that basically means is that you're going to bid on all the available free agents as they become available. Each week, as you know, the waivers run on like Wednesday morning or something, and then in the past, there would be a list, and whoever was at the top of the list would get first choice, so on and so forth. Well, now you get to bid a certain amount of whatever your budget remaining is on any player that you want. So if there's a good free agent on the wire, somebody goes down and his backup is sitting there, no more is it whoever's at the top of the list is the lucky guy. They get the best free agent waiver wire pickup of the week. Now we all have a shot at him, but it depends on how much you're willing to bid, and then the highest bidder gets that player. So there's strategy in getting players that you want. There's strategy in saving money throughout the course of the season so that you don't end up backed up in a corner. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're starting at $200. A lot of times leagues do a $100 budget, but we're starting at $200 just so that everybody can get the feel of how they like to play the waiver wire bid game, because now that's a game within our game. Do your research and, Godspeed. Now for the main event, the keepers and the draft order for the rapidly upcoming 2022 fantasy football season. Reminder, the draft is Tuesday, August 30th. It's 8:30 at 8:30, okay? 8:30 at 8:30. Can't miss it. More on that in a minute. The keepers for this season in draft order. With the first pick in this year's draft, Toddler Fight Club will be keeping James Robinson, running back from the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. James Robinson coming off an Achilles injury. Those are always interesting to see how players bounce back. Once upon a time, ACLs, Achilles, things like that were absolute death sentences for football players, especially running backs. Now it's a question of how each player individually responds, how long it takes. So James Robinson is interesting for that reason, and another reason, which we'll get to a little bit later in the list. Drafting second this year is Sizzler, who will be keeping Justin Herbert, quarterback from the Los Angeles Chargers, projected to be one of the top quarterbacks in fantasy football. Also provides him some flexibility because now he doesn't have to try and figure out when is too early or too late to draft a quarterback, because he's already got one of the top guys in his pocket going into the draft. It should be interesting to see how he fucks that up. Omar, with pick number 3, still has not named his team. Okay, that's a big issue here. That is a big issue. Now, Yahoo, the website, while very user-friendly for people who are not super smart, is not as great for a commissioner to be able to do things and help other teams. So like when in the past I was able to sort of like go in and help people do things and help things happen smoothly at the draft and all that. Yahoo doesn't make it as easy for the commissioner, doesn't give us as many tools to sort of help you. So I can't actually change Omar's team name. So instead, I will just shame him publicly and incessantly until he goes in there and changes his own team. For starters, he'll be keeping, his keeper is Cordarrelle Patterson, his dog shit piece of crap keeper for this year is running back Cordarrelle Patterson from the Atlanta Falcons, who are projected to have the #1 overall pick in next year's draft, which means that they're going to stink. And Cordarrelle Patterson had some sort of like weird outlier season last year, and that was the best that was left on Omar's piece of shit roster. So Cordarrelle Patterson is the stain on the toilet paper in the bathroom of the Omar team facilities. Picking 4th this year, a bit of an anomaly considering the team history, is Team Blumpkin. Normally good. Their keeper, wide receiver, Terry McLaurin. Now, I think a lot of us could agree that Terry McLaurin, athletically, talent-wise, one of the top receivers in the NFL, but his situation kind of sucks. He's one of those like great receivers that you wish would have a good quarterback, but he's got Carson Wentz. Good player. You're betting on talent there. Solid keeper pick, theoretically. Picking 5th in this year's draft is our proud papa, Mr. X, who will be keeping Justin Jefferson, J-Jeff, wide receiver from the Minnesota Vikings. By all accounts, the best ranked keeper. So congrats on stumbling into that. Maybe this year you'll put a team around him that can get y'all to the playoffs. Beer Muscles, picking 6th. Okay, sort of right in the middle of the pack. Strangely, for all of us, I think, becoming one of the more solid teams in the league. Contender for the playoffs. Bobby J, he can be taught. He's going to be keeping Dalton Schultz this year. His roster was a little weird. His year was a little weird. And his keeper is a little weird. You know, you got to keep somebody. Got to keep somebody. We'll see a few more examples like that, I think, as we go along this list. Picking 7th in this year's draft, which means that he made the playoffs last year. Good for you, buddy. Let's see if we can make it 2 in a row, is the Golden Showers. They'll be keeping stud quarterback Joe Burrow. Obviously, one of the consensus best young quarterbacks in the NFL, so this is a good long-term keeper pick. He's got one of the best receiver cores in the NFL right now. I don't think even that's a question, so that's really, really awesome. Ton of weapons. He's got probably the wimpiest, sort of most gutless head coach in the NFL. So they're punting on 4th and 1 every time. Danny Mack, however, is hoping that this is the year that they really open up the playbook. With the 8th pick, Pretty Boy Johnny will be keeping Michael Pittman, wide receiver, Indianapolis Colts. Now, this is a guy who everybody expects to break out. Again, like McLaurin earlier, tremendous receiver, questionable situation. Obviously, the Colts are a better team than the Commanders, and I don't think there's any argument that going from Wentz to Matt Ryan has upgraded the outlook for Michael Pittman. If not now, when? It's not now when, Mike. The Drunken Bums threw me a little bit of a curveball, but I really understand it when you step back. He's going to be keeping Derek Carr, quarterback, Oakland Raiders. Just got an upgrade with Devontae Adams, so he actually has a pretty legit set of weapons to throw to. Taking out everything and just looking statistically, pretty solid quarterback, both in real life and in fantasy. And so he can focus on, trying to build a team around his quarterback like Sizzler earlier. The only difference is the Bums make the playoffs. Picking 10th this year, sweep the leg. Your esteemed commissioner will not be keeping A.J. Brown for the 3rd season. Instead, we're going to be starting the clock on Travis Etienne, running back from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tons of upside. The interesting thing about this is that I think this is the first time we've ever had competing keepers going into a season. As I mentioned, Toddler Fight Club is keeping James Robinson. Sweep the Leg is keeping Travis Etienne. Now, they share a backfield, so that's going to be something that we're going to be keeping an eye on throughout the season to see which team made the better keeper investment there. Gotham Rogues is going to be celebrating their final season, one last run, the last dance with quarterback Lamar Jackson. They played in the championship last year and fell short. The Rogues, always a strong team, always a legitimate contender. One more shot with Lamar, as long as he's not having diarrhea. Not Narkowitz, Lamar Jackson. And finally, with the 12th pick, our champion, the Moth, will be keeping Darnell Mooney, wide receiver from the Chicago Bears. Now, he's another team who didn't really have a great selection of keeper choices, but they don't give out trophies for keeper choices. So once again, James Robinson, Justin Herbert, Cordarrelle Patterson, Terry McLaurin, Justin Jefferson, Dalton Schultz, Joe Burrow, Michael Pittman, Derek Carr, Travis Etienne, Lamar Jackson, and Darnell Mooney. That's 4 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. Plan accordingly. These players are no longer available in the draft, and you can take a look now at how you think the other guys are going to build their squads. Before we wrap it up, I am going to be holding a Google Meet for the draft where we can all pop on our computers. I believe there's a video function on Yahoo on the actual draft. I would like to try and get it going a little bit before the draft. Maybe play some sort of a game with everybody who can sign in. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards Google Meet, because that way we don't have to wait till the actual Yahoo thing launches or whatever. I'll be in touch with you guys about that. There it is. You know, rule changes, lineup changes, things like that. Prepare yourselves. 8:30 at 8:30. I will see you at the draft, where it's always sunny.